behemedaka in Yerushalayim. You're not supposed to raise a behemedaka in Yerushalayim, but there is an
In Eretz
exception
Yisrael, if there was an all of
in
Eretz
Eretz
Yisrael.
in Eretz Yisrael. I apologize. In Eretz
And I
Yisrael,
don't get it. I mean, all the others had behemoth dakas all over the place. So that was the national industry.
I'm not sure if it was the in the time of the Ovis that this Dirabanic Xera was enacted. It was enacted. It was it's a Dirabanan.
Of course, it wasn't then enacted.
Those behemoths were well trained.
So I'm not sure when this was enacted, but the Maisa does do damage, so they didn't want people raising behemoth dakas. You'd have to import them before Yom Tov, or we had an occasion. Then there was an allowance for 30 days you were allowed to import, but it doesn't mean you had a 30-day allowance. It means for 30 days before Yom Tov, before a Simcha, you could import, but you had to still get rid of it right after the Yom Tov or the Simcha. And there was another allowance made that we didn't learn yesterday in Shul, and that is Vatabach. If a person is in the meat business, then he is allowed to stock up on animals before the Yom HaShuk, 30 days as well, but he cannot keep animals past the Yom HaShuk. Vatabach lekech v'shoichet, lekech v'shoiha, ubulvat shel yisha ha'aguna shebehen lamed yom. The latecomers, the ones that you bought the day before the Yom HaShuk, their 30 days expires the next day. They don't have a full 30 days on those animals. Gewaltig. Zog the hele Gemara. It's a beautiful Gemara now. Sho'alu Talmidav es Rabbi Gamliel. The Talmidim of Rabbi Gamliel asked him, Mau legadel. Are we allowed to raise animals, behemoth dakas in Eretz Yisrael? Amalani answered, mutter, it's mutter. Fragt Gemara about non ein megadlen. How could you say it's mutter? We have a Mishnah that says it's aser. Elahachi kabayimene. Mau lishois. Can we have it by us before Yom Tov? We have it before Chasna. That's what they were asking about, the exception. And that, Amar Lahen Mutter. These animals shouldn't be roaming around in the flocks. You have to tie it to the edge of your bed, because that's what they used to do to prepare animals for karbanis. They would be biting them by keeping them tied to the edge of their bed. I'm not sure how well the Oilim used to sleep in the month before Yom Tov if they had like 5 animals tied to their beds. It's very similar to the way us grandparents sleep Yom Tov when they're iniklach all over the place. It's the same thing. They're jumping and bouncing and dancing. I think the main purpose of this was so that after Yom Tov, your house should feel calm and quiet, no matter what was going on until then. It's like the story in Chelm where someone complained that his house was too small. So the Rav told him every day as he complained to bring in more animals, more farm animals into his house. And as he complained that it was still too small, he kept on bringing in more and more animals until finally he took them all out. And they said, wow, my house now became so big. Right? So it's similar to that. Tanu Rabban. There was a chassid echad, he was tzoyik, or tzoyik would make ka'ev halev. He couldn't even catch his breath. To me, that sounds like one of the symptoms of a heart attack. So would you say that maybe this is a heart attack? So if we would agree that this might be a heart attack, then we would also have to agree that this is a shaylav sakonis nefashos. And they asked the doctors, what is the solution? If I try this solution, my doctor would kill me. But this is what the solution is, what the doctor said in those days. They told him, the only thing that could save this man, every morning he has to drink fresh milk. Fresh milk means directly from the goat. Every morning he has to have a delicious glass of fresh milk that comes directly from the goat. Some people would have rather died. And they brought him a goat, and they tied it to the bedpost. And every morning he would drink from it to improve his heart condition. Once upon a time, right? His friends decided, let's go visit him. He's not feeling well. And they walked into the house and they saw a goat in the house. Kivin Shiroi saw A's Kshura Bakari Amita, they fled. Chazru La'achayreim. They turned back and ran for their lives. V'amru listim mizuyin b'veisei shozeh. There's listim mizuyin because roya b'sadei sachayim. What does a behemoth daka do? So Rashi, it eats in other people's fields. V'goyz l'sarabim. So you have literally armed robbers roaming around in this guy's house. This guy's harboring criminals. V'onu nichnas and that's lie. And we should go be mevakachayla. We are out of here. Yoshvu, they sat down, Ubatku, and they were boidik this person, this tzaddik in their midst. And they couldn't find any avera that this person had. That was the only avera that this yid had. And this yid as well, Omar, he said, I know, I have no averas. I'm clean. Shavarti al diver chaverai, because I was over on the psak of my friends. So apparently his friends disagreed with Rabbi Gamaliel, who said that for a special reason he can. So the first and most important question that the Rishonim discuss here is, this is pikuach nefesh. For pikuach nefesh, avada, you're allowed to do anything. So this brings up a couple of different approaches. If you remember, we had a shaila a couple of blot ago about a question that was posed by David HaMelech. He sent shluchim to the Bezdin to ask the shaila. They were fighting the Pelishtim, and the Pelishtim were hiding in piles of barley and piles of adoshim, of lentils, which belonged to Jews. The question was, could I burn these piles so that I could flush out the enemy so that they'll be killed? And even though I'm damaging Mammon Chaverei, so you ought to be matzal nafshach, you ought to save your life b'Mammon Chaverei. And when we learned that Gemara, we also had very fair. What do you mean? It's pikuach nefesh. We know the only three averos for which you have to be Moshe nefesh are avodah zarah, gilui rash, shvichas damim. Ksela is not one on the list. So it's a shaila. But there is a shita, which is the shita of Rashi that learned over there that there was a question. Maybe you're not allowed to. So it could be this is following the apsak that even though he was in danger, his life was in danger, he had a problem with his heart. Nevertheless, the moment chaverich, you're not allowed to save your life. Then we had another pshat over there. I just learned avada, you're allowed to. The question really is if you have to pay back. So that wouldn't fit into, that wouldn't explain why here there was a problem with him having this menace in his house. So there are those who learn, and maybe it was not a sequence of hushes. Although from Rashi it's mashma, maybe it was heartburn. Maybe it wasn't a heart attack. Maybe it was just heartburn. I'm not sure. Is there a basic element to goat's milk? Does anybody know what the pH is of goat's milk? Normally, we take base. Our antacids are base because it sort of neutralizes the acid. I wonder what the chemical content of goat's milk is. But there's a third pshat. The third pshat is
it could have lactic acid. So
but usually heartburn is acidic too. It needs base
to
offset it.
So it's not going to help.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure. I don't understand this remedy. But there's another question: how in heavens could these people possibly know that this guy had only this avera? Well, could they read his mind? How could you go over to somebody and they sat down and they were mavakar and they knew he had no averas? How in the world do they know that? The teretz is, we must be speaking about Ga'oinim, Amiroyim, or even Tanoim who had Ruach HaKodesh. And they were able to see Ruach HaKodesh that this Yid had no averas.
Could they see? Who says the goat was allowed out to graze?
Even if it wasn't, the Chazal say you're not allowed to have it, not allowed to harbor that criminal. So if I'm not mistaken, and David will correct me, there is a Ramban at the end of Bechul Koisai that discusses whether or not you're allowed to go to a doctor. And he says by the Nevi'im, you weren't allowed to go to a doctor. It's a chasar and a muna. You have to go to the Navi, to do tshuva. That's the remedy you had to have. So could be the taina on him was, yes, it was pikuach nefesh, but a man on his madrega shouldn't be seeing doctors. he should be following the Ramban's way of refuah. Avada, no one should think that they can try that at home, that they can do schoolis and not follow a doctor. As a matter of fact, there are Moshe Passos halacha lemaisa that you're mechuyev to go to doctors today, and you're mechuyev to take medicine. Ad kedei kach that if someone doesn't want to go to a doctor and take medicine, you're actually even allowed to force him. And Moshe also paskins that if a father asks, I think it's a Moshe or could be Bava Yosef paskins that if a father asks his son, "Could you please bring me a cigarette?" the son is supposed to refuse because it's not good for the son. So when I ask my child, "Could you bring me a cookie?" he's supposed to tell me, "No, Tati, I can't bring you a cookie." And in fact, he says that. So that's this Gemara. So two important things. So we have three ways why he wasn't allowed to be over Geneva in order to save his life, either because of the Ramban story, he was on the Madrega of Brucha Kodesh, obviously. Such a person doesn't need revuas, or it was not a Sekonos Nefashis, or we had a Shita that even by Sekonos Nefashis, you're not allowed to save yourself the moment Chavim. Omar Bishmal, Mebalabatim Shebegalil Ha'elyon, Hayu Beis Abba. My father came from the Balabatim of the Upper Galil. So the Upper Galil would be like Tzvas area, or is that even? Yeah, I think Tzvas is considered the Upper Galil, right? So my father was from that neighborhood. Why was the Galil Elyon Harv? Shayumarin Becharshin. They would have their animals graze in these forests. Now we actually learned that that's not a problem to graze in forests. So we'll have to see what the issue was. V'donin dinei mamanis biyachid, and they pass in biyachid without going to a proper bez. Even though they had these forests, and in your forest you're allowed to graze, but the problem was their path to get from their yard to these charshim was so dektana haisa umavirin derech aleha, and they would go through it, and the animals would graze along the way in that little area. As Rashi says, the reason why it was charv is you marry baby dak shalem becharshin, but if you charshin samach levatein how you roin besad sacherim, they were not roy besad sacherim, umshum charshin like a gezel, and to graze in the forest. There's no isuk zela. The amalil aval magadlim becharshin. We said you're allowed to be megadol animals in these forests. Nami, and later on as well, we're going to see Yeshua, when Yeshua originally gave out the land, he made certain takanos that people have to accept. People have to accept certain. What is the word for it? When people have a right of way through your property, not a lien. People had certain. Victor, what is it called when somebody has like rights, like to walk through your property or something? There's a word for it. I forgot what it is. It's the English word for it.
We all understand it.
Okay.
Right of way.
It's a right of way, but there's like a technical word for it. I forget what it's called. But it's like a right of way. It's like if the government has a right, like in Naguda, in the backyard of Naguda.
Yeah, like it's expropriated?
No, there's a storm drain in Naguda, that's city property that drains from there onto the drain in Carmichael. So and it goes through the yard of the people behind us, but there's a word for it. But it's like a right of way. Okay, look, even if somebody owns a forest, he's not allowed to be makbid that animals shouldn't graze there. Nevertheless, Nenshu, they were punished. Why? Because to get to the yar,
Easement.
Easement. Right, that's the word for it. Easement, that's right. Now, what's the issue of Don Yechidi? The issue of Don Yechidi is because it opens you up to possible corruption. And we know Ashoicha Ya'aver Ene Pikchim. So Rabbi Rausen spoke out a story with a Dayan that lived in the time of the Chidah. And I don't remember what his name was, but the Chidah said Eidus about him, that at the end of his life he got blind. And he was a mamash and erlich tzaddik who never took shoichat. And he davened to the Rebbeinu Shalom, please heal my blindness so people shouldn't think that my judgments were corrupt. And in fact, he was able to see, his vision was restored. And the Chidah said, I personally witnessed signatures that he signed while he was blind, and then signatures that he signed later after he was healed, and you saw the difference in his signature, so it's clear that he actually was healed because Hashem didn't want him to be looked upon like he was dishonest when in fact he was very honest. And then there's the story of the Dayan who went deaf. So they asked him, deaf, Sheikhad, you come blind for, not for deafness. He said, yeah, they only promised it to me. I never saw the money. Tanu Rabban, Roya Sha'asa Tshuva, a shepherd that did tshuva. So he used to have animals, behemoths dakas near Yisrael, and now he wants to do tshuva. The problem is, what does he do with all his behemoths dakas? Ein mechai b'noisoi lim karmiyat. We don't make him sell everything, because then he would have to sell at a tremendous loss. Elamoicher al yad al yad. He's allowed to slowly sell off the animals so that he can at least retrieve as much money from them as possible. V'chein ger shenafu like klovim v'chazer b'yushasei. We know that even a gersh and his gar chenoilad, they're misakin that if he has a yerusha, he gets to keep it, because otherwise he would consider maybe going back because could be costing him a lot of money. So ein mechayv noisi limkar miyad. You don't make him liquidate those animals that he's not allowed to be holding on to right away. Lamoicher al yad al yad. V'chein misha nadar likach bayis v'likach isha be'eretz Yisrael. Someone made a nether that he's going to buy a house in Eretz Yisrael, he's going to marry a woman from Eretz Yisrael. Ein mechayv noisi likach miyad. You don't make him go marry the first Israeli woman that he sees. He's allowed to take his time to find a house that suits his needs and a wife that suits his needs. He doesn't have to just take the first wife because he has to be Mekayim his nether as quickly as possible. And there was a story with a woman. Her son was bothering her. I guess she was single, and her son was pressuring her to remarry. So she was so pressured, she finds, okay, I swear I'm going to get married right away. The cops of Anishba call me Shiyavai. Any person who comes and wants to marry me, I will not turn them down. Suddenly there was a line around her house. I'm not sure either she was very pretty or she was very wealthy, but suddenly a long line formed around her house. The cops to Allah b'nei Adam she'enan mehuganim, and somehow she attracted people who were not appropriate shidduchim for her. So now she doesn't know what to do. Do I have to marry these people because I promised I'm going to marry the first person that asks for my hand? They told her, she didn't mean I'm going to marry any pair of pants that comes by. Today, even could be in a skirt. But it means she's going to find somebody who's appropriate and she's going to marry that person. Just like we said, you're not allowed to raise a behemah in Eretz Yisrael. So to a little deer, you're not allowed to raise. You're allowed to raise klovim kufrim, which Rashi says are either little tiny dogs. I forgot what this is called. A chihuahua, I think they're called. But it also could mean like a Saint Bernard. Let's see what Rashi says over here. Klovim kufrim ketanim b'nanosim. They're like really tiny ones. They're very calm. Maybe that means a Saint Bernard. Right? I think those are very big dogs. I don't know my dogs. The only dogs I like are the ones that you can eat with relish and coleslaw and mustard. The chasulim and cats. You should not be raising cats. The kufin and monkeys. The chuldais and weasels. The chuldais fanoim, the weasels that hang around bushes. Why? This is
saying you can raise these.
Oh, you can. I'm sorry. You're allowed to raise these things. Why? Because they clean the house. They eat mice, so they clean up the mice from your house. So therefore, you could raise those. My chuldosh noim. What are these chuldosh that we're talking about? Rav Yehuda shartza chartza. There's shartza. There's the shartza chartza, which we'll see soon what that means. Bikadami charza. It means the katini shakya. Its thighs are very thin. It has very thin legs. Viraya, and they graze. They eat beini vardini amongst the bushes. Rashi's vardini is a snare. Umay shartza. So Tosfos explains what the Gemara is asking here. If these items are called chuldois and they're not considered shrotzim lagabit tumas shrotzim, so what are shrotzim? The mitasoi shake. That they don't have thin legs, but they have very short legs. Those would be the shrotzim that have too much shrotzim. But the sharza charza, they are not considered halachically shrotzim. The ikadamri, charza, the katini shakya. It's these charzas that have thin legs. And viraya, beini, vardini, and they also hang out amongst the bushes. Umay sharza, the mitasoshak. Oh, I did already. I'm sorry. Amar Rabbi Yudah Amar Asinu atzmeinu bebavel k'Eretz Yisrael. We were accepted upon ourselves the same chumrah of Eretz Yisrael. We accepted upon ourselves in Bavel, lebehemedaka legabi da'alocha, that we also don't raise behemedakas in Bavel. Amar Vada Baravel Rafuna, didachmai. What do you do with your animals? Because you have behemedakas in your household. Amalei, he said, no, mine are no problem. Didon kamintereluhu chayva. My wife chayva, she watches them, and she makes sure that they stay safe. The next line is quite shocking. Amalei, so Rav Acha bar Ava told Rav Huna, chayva tikverinu lebana. Chayva should bury her children. That sounds like a curse. We're going to soon see in Tosfos that there's another interpretation of this line that it wasn't a curse. Anyway, but these words came out of the mouth of a holy Yid. Kulu shnei Rav Ada bar Ava lo yikayim zara lo Rav Huna mechayva. Rav Huna never had children from his wife Chayva as long as Rav Ada bar Ava was alive. Let's see Tosfos. Zog Tosfos Chayva tikvinu lebna pirshrach bitmia. Will Chayva bury her children? In other words, the chidarka likfor baneha sheino sekes legadlan elo sekes legadal tzayin. Are you telling me that she totally is going to ignore her children, abandon them, so that she can focus full time on watching these animals? Because if not, she can't possibly watch them properly. So he never even cursed her at all. He just said, "What is she going to abandon her kids?" But even when something comes out of a tzaddik's mouth, even though he didn't mean it, it deals with it creates a problem. Okay. The second shot is how we learned is inami yesh loymar and yira she's not afraid to take onish before panel. But whatever the case is, because of that, Rav Huna didn't have children from Chayva. Ikadamri Amar Rav Huna. It's very funny that his wife's name was Liability. I wonder where she got that name from. I wonder if he had a credit card. Okay, anyway, I think the back takes out Amarav. Amravuna Asina Atzmeni Bebavel Keret Yisrael Beimedaka Michi Asa Rav LeBavel from the time Rav came to Bavel. Because when Rav came to Bavel and opened up his yeshiva, that created a great influx. Many Yidden moved to Bavel at that time, and that's why they instituted this minhag. Rav Shmuel Rabasi. This is a very, very cute story. This is a very cute story. Rav Shmuel Rabasi, Alex Labowitz, Achroinu Levracha, told me that he was once sent by the yeshiva to the airport to pick up Rav Ruderman. Rav Ruderman had been coming back to Baltimore from some place where he was. So they sent him as one of the Talmidim to pick up Rav Ruderman from the airport. So Rav Ruderman wasn't able to see at that time. So they told the airlines that Rav Ruderman needs to have an escort to go with him because he can't see where he's going. So there were two stewardesses that walked on either side of him. So when he gets to the airport, he sees sitting in the arrivals lounge, Rav Ruderman sitting there, and there's a stewardess on either side of him. So he gets up because he doesn't want to sit in between two women, and he walks over past one of the stewardesses. So now he's sitting beside one stewardess, but the two stewardesses are on one side of him. So the stewardess that was just left out got up to sit on the other side because they were instructed to be one on each side. So he got up again, and then he was going back and forth up and down the bench. So Alex said, I didn't go right away and introduce myself to pick him up. I wanted to watch to see what would happen. And they were like playing musical chairs going up and down the bench because nobody was happy with the positioning. So here's a story like this. Rav Ushmuel Veravasi, the triumvirate, Ikaloi Levei Shavu Haben. They came to the simcha of a week after a child was born. What is that? Bris Milah. Al Shem Sha'avur Alav Shaviyam. V'amrila Levei Yeshua Ben, which Rashi says, Mishte Shashin Lepidina Ben Bechor. So they were either going together to a bris or they were going together to a pidyon ben. Rav refused to walk in first. because lo ayil kamed Shmuel. Out of respect for Shmuel, he wouldn't walk in before Shmuel. The problem was that Shmuel wouldn't walk in before Abasi. Shmuel turning over on top of base, loy ayil kamed Abasi. He refused to go in before Abasi. So Abasi would have to go first. But the problem is Abasi loy ayil kamed Rav. So now who goes in first? What are we going to do? So if two people have to go together, I guess it was big enough of a door that two people can go together. So Amri, they figured this out. Man Nisrach, who should remain back and two could go in together. Nisrach Shmuel, if you want to suggest that Shmuel should stay back, V'nesi Rav Rabasi, or V'nisrach Rav or Rabasi. So that's what they decided to do. Shmuel will stay back and Rav and Rabasi will go first. Frag the Gemara, V'nisrach Rav or Rabasi. Why wouldn't Rav or Rabasi stay back? And maybe Shmuel should go with one of the two. So more Rav Milso Ba'alma who David Leilu Shmuel, Mishma Humaisa. The Lache, there was really Rav and Rabasi were greater. And really Shmuel had to have coverage for them. So why was Rav insistent on being Mechavet Shmuel? Because there was a story where Rav cursed Shmuel in Masechah Shabbos, and he felt bad that he did. And because of that, he went out of his way to show covered Adbrei Rav Alei. Therefore, Rav Rashi Hitinu Alei Linag by covered. He accepted upon himself to treat Shmuel with an extra level of respect, and that's why he wouldn't go in. But Be'etzim Shmuel was really subservient to Rav and Rabasi, so that's why they decided that Rav and Rabasi would walk in together at first, and then Shmuel would come behind him. Anyway, they were having this whole discussion by the door, who's going to come in. While this is happening, Adahachi Vahachi also Shunra Kate Liyada Dinuka. Shunra is a cat or a weasel. It's in the Chad Gadja. What does the article tie to Shunra?
A cat.
A cat? Okay, maybe it was like a bobcat. I don't know if it was like a putty tat that was going after a Tweety bird, but it was probably a cat that bites off hands of a child. So Nofak Rav Vidarash. Now we're going to see that this didn't happen at the same time. Rav didn't announce this at that time. We're just quoting or something that's relevant to the story. Okay. Novak Rav Vidarash Chasul, a cat, muter lahargoy. If you see a cat, you're allowed to kill it. It's a menace to society. And you're not allowed to keep a cat in your house. And if someone steals it, ve'ein boy mishum gazel. And if you find it, ve'ein boy mishum hashev aved l'bayim. Frank the Gemara, Rav is really speaking quite redundant because a lot of the things he said, we understood from the other things that he said. If you're allowed to kill this cat, my niyusu asher l'kaimoy. Why in the world does he have to tell us to be mekayimit? If anybody's allowed to come and kill it, obviously you're not allowed to keep it. So Gemara, no. But he's sure leka. It's a mutter to kill if you see one roaming around, but it's still not usher to have one of them. Kamash it's also to have one of them. If you're telling me anybody's allowed to take it, and it's not called gezel, my new su ain't by mishum hashav aved l'bayim. If you're allowed to steal it, it's poshut that if you find it, you don't have to return to the bayim. Even if you kill it, you might think you have to give its skin, which is a value, back to the owner. No, you don't even have to do that. As Tosha says, she'imotzon mace, if you found a dead cat, ain't chayiv b'shavas ha'or. You don't have to. Tosha says, "Uktzastema still shver. Kiven dashmin de'im b'mishum gazel. If there's no din gazel on it, so of course I'm allowed to keep the oiroy. L'ma yitzrach hach the mutar l'argoy. Yishloimer de'in lachash kiven the mitchila kamer the mutar l'argoy. In the Chanami, it's somewhat repetitive, but he said mutar l'argoy first. Meisvei. Meisvei Rab Shimon ben Elazar. Rab Shimon ben Elazar, Eimer, megadlin kalavim. You're allowed to raise dogs. Kufrin. Klavim kufrin are either the Saint Bernard dogs that are not wild, or the little chihuahuas, the chasulin and cats, the kupin and monkeys, the chuldos and weasels, the chuldosnoim, the bnei shesun l'nakas abayis. So how could you tell me you're allowed to kill a cat, you're not allowed to be megadol a cat? We have a meforship brisa that says you're allowed to keep a cat going. Zok Gemara, the devil is in the details. Loikash haba uchma. This is with a black cat. Habechayura. A black cat you're allowed to keep. A white cat is dangerous. You're not allowed to keep. Frank the Gemara, the Rab, the story with Rab, Uchmahava. It was a black cat, so that should have been mutter. Zok Gemara, Hasam Uchma Bar Chayura Hava. Yes, it was black, but its parents were white. That's still wild. Frank Gemara, but that's not true either. Ravina had a question about that. The boy Ravina Uchma Bar Chayura, if it's a black cat, the son of a white cat, Mahu. Zok Gemara, no, Kikam Boy Ravina. It was a black cat whose mother was a white cat, but the grandmother was a black cat. There, the Shaila, maybe it's calm. But Maisa the Rab, so even a cat, you have to be boidik to yichus, because depending on its grandmother, you might or might not be able to keep it. If we're talking about killing cats, the first word the Gemara introduces after killing cats is Chabad. I'm not sure if there's a connection. Chabad biach b'chan siman. I'm just saying the Gemara. Is a kiva here now? Okay. Amar Rab Acha bar Papa, and this is going to feel like we're making a siyum. Amar Rab Acha bar Papa mishum Rab Aber bar Papa mishum Rab Ader bar Papa. But Amri la Amar Rab Aber bar Papa mishum Rab Chia bar Papa mishum Rab Acha bar Papa. But Amri la Amar Rab Aber bar Papa mishum Rab Acha bar Papa mishum Rab Chanina bar Papa. So the question is, which Papa said what? But whatever the credit of this halacha goes to, this is the halacha. Masriin ala chichoch b'Shabbos. Chichoch is a very painful type of skin, of a skin affliction. Rashi says, "Skin shemischachecha adam Allah." Person scratches, it becomes very painful. So masriin means you're allowed to daven barabim and ask for rachmanis from the Rebbeinu Shalom on Shabbos. And videlas hanin elas. Another interesting comment is, if a door is closing on you, meaning you're in trouble, loy b'meher tipatach. It's not easy to open the door that's closing on you when things aren't looking so good. And balakeach buys Eretz Yisrael, and someone who buys a house in Eretz Yisrael, koisvin alav oino, you're allowed to write a receipt for it to record the sale afilu b'Shabbos. Now this is a cocktail of three different halachas that seem completely irrelevant to one another, but the Tzad HaShavah brought down in the Achronim is they're all things that are very time sensitive. Meisei Frank the Gemara. The Shar Puranis and instructions of voice ala tzibur and other Puranis that occur to the tzibur can go in chichoch, exactly the discussion that we're having. Chagov is a grasshopper. Zuvov is a fly. Tzirus is something, a wasp. The yitosh, I guess these are all animals that can cause damage either to a person or to crops. And vishiluach nachashim v'akravim, or if they have a swarming of snakes and scorpions, loy hoyu masriyan, you weren't allowed to be masriya, public screaming. Elat tzoyakim, which Rashi teaches is biyochid. Tzoyakim is Rashi. Tzoyakim is biyochid. Rashi says. Okay. We'll talk more. Look, Asher. What type of shchin are you only allowed to be tzoyik and not masriya? That's yovesh. A dry type of skin affliction is not as dangerous, not as painful. But a moist one is very painful. Kam belach, kam beyovish. And now, for the Lublina strikes again, we're talking about Yitzis Mitzrayim. Now we're in those parshas. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Shchin shehevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzrayim. It was lachmi b'chutz, v'yovish b'fnim, and I guess that combination is very severe. Shneimar v'hi Shchin ababuos hareich ba'odem u'ba'behem. Videlas hananelos. What about the third comment? Videlas, or the second comment. Videlas hananelos. Loy b'meheret tipatach, ma'hi, mazutra amar, smicha. I do not know what smicha means. What does the article say smicha? What does that mean? Smicha. Mazutra amar smicha. Let's see what he says in the Gimel. Lismicha. I don't know what that means exactly.
Ordination.
Sorry?
Smicha. Ordination.
So you do smicha on an animal? What does that mean?
That is where it has been decided to ordain a particular sage and confer upon him the title rabbi. But for some reason, we're prevented from doing so. This ordination will no longer be easily accomplished. For this instance, where Rabbi troubled himself to ordain Shmuel, it did not come to pass. or where Rabbi Yochanan was eager to ordain Rav Chanina.
So what does that mean? What does it mean? Means you can't get smicha? Oh, once someone refuses to give somebody smicha, it's not so posh that he should get smicha from somewhere else. Okay, Rav Ashi Amar, Kala Marian loy, if someone has it bad, there's a problem, loy b'mher mativan loy. He's not going to be able to turn around the situation very easily. Rabbacha Medifti Amar, la'olamei mativan. You'll never be able to turn the situation around. But loy, it's not true. Rabbacha Medifti, milta denafshehu the Omar, he was saying something that was completely different. As Rashi says, milta denafshehu b'vavash b'achotim, the imnua la'usuva b'reisha, lo yistayim milsa. He was talking about himself where there was a talk about him becoming a Rosh Yeshiva, and it ended up not working out. So on him, he said, I'll never become a Rosh Yeshiva. Okay, what about, so Rabbacha Medifti Milsa D'Nav Shehu Damar. V'alakech, not a third halacha. V'alakech Bayis Beretz Yisrael, Koistan of Einoi, Afilu B'Shabbos, Frankim or B'Shabbos, Al Kedaitach. Are you allowed to be over a malacha dairais of Tziva to write a star on the Mechir of Karka? Ela Kedamar Rabbi Hasam, it's Omer L'Nachri V'Oiseh. You can have Amir L'Nachri Zerabanan, they allow a guy to write it. Hachanami Omer L'Nachri V'Oiseh. Yeah, Fagav da Amir L'Nachri Shavusi, it's a Derabanan Dik Yisr. Yishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, in order to be able to seal a deal and make sure that we could take over land in Eretz Yisrael, like goes with Rabbanan, the Rabbanan relaxed at the kana of the Isra Amir L'Nachri. Amar B'Shmuel by Nachmani Amar B'Yadishan, Halakeach Ir Be'eretz Yisrael. If you buy a city in Eretz Yisrael, Kaif and Oisai Likach LaDerech Me'aber Ruchliseh, we forced a person to also buy a road to access the city from all four sides, so that people can access the city. Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, because we want to make sure it'll be easy to go into Eretz Yisrael and inhabit it. Okay, we'll stop here. There's Hashem, and we will learn that Pei Aleph tomorrow. Today is the Yortat of a very, very holy Yid who has a huge chus in bringing back thousands upon thousands of Yidden to Yiddishkeit from Noach Weinberg, the Yeshiva Vesha Torah. His Yortat is today. May the Hashem should have a lead.
Heb ze gezien en dus als in New Jersey, ik het een waldmatch. Ik zei,